Hey, everyone, and welcome to Think, Engage, Thrive, where we bring you some of the best entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial stories to give you a realistic view of what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. And tonight, we have a great guest, and you're going to love him, Sid Mohasseb, and he's known as the Entrepreneur Philosopher. And we're going to find out what that means. He's talked about it a little bit with me, but I really am interested in. We did the pre-marketing for the show, and a lot of people had that question: what exactly is an entrepreneur philosopher? So I think it's going to be cool to listen to him. He's an extremely well-versed guy. He's done all kinds of things, from starting his own businesses to running his own businesses to investing in businesses, writing books. You've probably seen him write in Forbes and Fortune and some of these magazines and business magazines. You probably didn't even know about it. He's done TEDx talks. I mean, the guy has done pretty much everything. So we're going to hear from him. And in the description of the show are all the links to his website, his books, his TED talks. He's done a couple of them. So his books. So he's written one that we're going to get into tonight a little bit called "You Are Not Them: The Authentic Entrepreneur's Way." So I think I've given him a decent background. So let's bring him in and talk to him and see what he's got to say. Hi, Sid. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Hello, Phil. It's great to be here. I thought you were going to say, let's bring him in and grill him.
Yeah, I do want to grill him. Why don't you give us a little background, a little history of who you are, what got you here, being an entrepreneur, and all the things you've accomplished, because you've certainly accomplished a tremendous amount.
Sure. So what got me here was a plane uh, about close to 50 years ago, 40 somewhat, 46, 7 years ago. When I was 16, I came on my own um, and um, and went to school here. Went to USC, which is where I teach now. As full circle back, I teach both in the engineering school and the business school. And in between, I started my first business while I was in college. I was still at USC. Sold that, and I would say I spent pretty much every penny of it, which was a 10x, which was a great exit, somewhere between LA and Vegas and in between. And started as an analyst at a consulting firm, which gave me a tremendous opportunity to work with really large businesses. So I served clients on strategy and operations side, like Motorola, IBM, Federal Reserve Bank, Union Bank, and some others. Um, and I started my own consulting firm after I was a partner of that previous firm for a couple of years. And I did what they call corporate development
Mm.
consulting. And I'm aging myself. This is in the 80s. And what's hot is these leverage buyouts,
Yeah.
where folks in Wall Street figured out that, hey, you can manipulate the spreadsheets and figure out some assets and buy companies and then run them, divide them, sell them, all that sort of stuff. Well, they were great at the numbers, but they needed people to strategize and run and optimize and do re-engineering of the processes, and that was us. So I did that as a partner with the previous firm, and after a couple of years, I said, this doesn't make sense. I make good hourly rates, but hey, those guys make 100 times what I make, and I'm doing the work.
Yeah.
So got into that game pretty much in the 90s. Bought a few companies from DuPont and others, mostly turnarounds. So they weren't doing well. They were in manufacturing or distribution. So I did that. Along the side of that, we had our consulting practice, and mostly in a serendipity way that we were doing something for a client, and they would say, "Hey, here's a problem we have," and would say, "Hey, this is a real problem, not just for you, for a lot of people," and come up with an idea, and boom, there was a business.
Yeah.
So one of them turned out to be we built a resource allocation model for the courts that ended up being in 96 courts across the nation, and I sold that to a company. And my claim to fame is that it eventually got purchased by Charlie Munger.
Oh.
Uh, but you got to grab at credibility wherever you can, I suppose. And along the way, I built a number of other companies. Mostly had to do with software and technology somehow or another. So, um, for example, we did a carve out. That means buying a piece of a company, which was in electronic components distribution, and started offices in China and in Hong Kong, in Europe, and in US, and we worked with almost 9,000 providers and suppliers across the globe, and we used lots of technology in order to essentially hedge the market in multiple places. Um, so that took us essentially to the 2000s. So I fast forwarded. Along the way, there was a couple of companies that didn't work, and a few that did work, and we built it and we sold it.
Mhm.
In 2000, I started making investments in early stage companies as an angel investor, first independently, and then I joined Tech Coast Angels, which is the largest angel investment entity in the US. And I became the president of Tech Coast Angels. And During that period, I looked at a lot of deals, and I mean a lot. And then I started a venture fund, venture farm, and we made investments again in early stage companies right before the VCs, and had a lot of good outcomes. Had good luck, good focus. It was hard, lots of efforts, lots of boards, lots of activities. We survived the 2008 downturn, and we did about a 75% exit of the companies, and had a good north of 10-12x uh, return. Um, One of the companies in that group during the 2009 and 10 had a lot of potential, but the VC market was really harsh. So I was the chairman and the major investor. So I jumped in as the CEO with the objective of driving it to exit. It took us about a year to package it and sold it to KPMG, which I'm sure you know and your audience may know. It's one of the largest advisory and accounting firms. We were part of the advisory. This was
Sure.
very early in data analytics. And what happened was that company became the seed of what they now call Lighthouse. And I understand that it does north of 250 million in revenue, and it has about a couple of thousand people in it.
Wow.
So I stayed a bit at KPMG. I helped them shape their KPMG Capital, which was targeting $100 million fund, and ended up being a part of their strategy group and the head of their strategic innovation. Um, that was uh, that was about, I think, 7-8 years ago, and I left, started writing books. Because I thought I'm old enough that I have something to say, regardless of anybody wanting to hear them. Um, so as you mentioned, I have a couple of books. I have hundreds of articles, as you mentioned, from Harvard Business Review to London School of Economics on the more academic side, uh, to the Forbes and the Hill and the Independent, and a bunch of foreign policy. Sometimes, again, you think you have an opinion about everything and everything when you get old.
Yeah.
For the past 20 years, I've also been teaching. So now a third of my time is in teaching. I teach, as I mentioned, both in engineering and business school at USC, University of Southern California. I do some speaking engagements and write articles and stuff. And I also do some advisory work for some of the companies that I'm invested in and that I'm not, that are a little bigger, and we position them for essentially exits.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was really to give insight into raising capital. You were an angel investor, which is very early stage, and that's pretty much right after friends and family round, right? And then you also did some private equity, venture funding, things like that at later stages before the A rounds. So, you know, in my experience of working with young entrepreneurs today, they have this idea that they're going to put together a 6 or an 8 page deck, walk into a room of investors, and walk out with a check of $10 million. Everybody's just going to go ooh and ah over their idea, over their concept. And having had to raise money myself for businesses, it just never worked out that way. It's a grind. It's a difficult thing to raise money. But what are some of the things that angel investors look for? Let's talk about that first, because that's so early stage that it
Yeah.
really takes a different mentality than like an A round.
So before I get there, let's think about this. Everybody wants to be LeBron James or Kobe or Michael Jordan or any of those. What they don't understand is what went into being LeBron James.
Yeah.
And not everybody that's really good gets that opportunity to play at that scale. If he or she was a couple of inches shorter, if he had been accepted as the third round as opposed to first, or fourth round as opposed to second, life would have been different. So we look at somebody like Zuckerberg and we say, oh, you see, you don't even need to have an education. Or Bill Gates. Bill Gates reads tens of books a month. Yes, he didn't finish school because he was ahead of that stuff, and he's reading a lot and he's learning a lot, and it's not like he's an idiot and he can win. So the key thing to remember is that there's a lot of marketing and hoopla, and nobody covers in the media all the failures that happens. Why? Because nobody cares. It's not sexy. It's not clickbait that you say, hey, you see all these thousands and thousands of people that failed. No, you pick the ones that are, sexy and handsome and this and that, and you put those in front. And, you talk about their billions and whatever. So is it true that some people have gotten money and still may? I mean, these days it's pretty hard, but with 10-page PowerPoints, yeah, it's true. But it's 1 in 10,000, 1 in 20,000.
Yeah.
I heard something that perhaps I've been saying this, and maybe if this guy says it, people would listen. I've always said ideas are a dime a dozen. I mean, you can dream up, have a couple of scotches or whatever is your poison of choice, smoke some of this or some of that, and you can have an idea. It's the execution that's complicated. It's getting there that's complicated. And I was listening on a piece of a podcast that somebody shared with me, and Elon Musk was saying the same thing. He was saying, I'm not discounting the value of a good idea, but making a car is really, really complicated. It's not just, hey, let's go have an electric car and here's the design. All those pieces, tens of thousands of decisions and mechanics and all of that is complicated.
Yeah.
So so part of the reason that I think people, you mentioned why they call me entrepreneur, is because I begin to philosophize about the mindsets of things. It's not, there's a lot of people with how to's, do this 3 things and do this 4 things. And unfortunately, we've turned into a society, and we're building entrepreneurs and raising expectations that life is like IKEA.
Yeah.
You go to IKEA and they say, hey, screw this piece to this piece, and voila, you've got a couch, or you've got a bookcase. So entrepreneurship is not like that. Life is not like that. There is no real how to's. Yes, the mechanics of turn the screws to the right or to the left is like, okay, how do you do accounting? But the fact that you know how to do accounting, that doesn't make you qualified as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I believe, and I haven't forgotten about your question, but I want to take you there, because you have to see the lens that I see the life through.
Why you're a philosopher.
No, and why would I define what's needed in the way that I would define it? So if you go back, what an entrepreneur is, the first time the word was used was in 1700s, beginning of 1700s, by a French guy. And he said an entrepreneur is someone who has something and wants to exchange that with something of higher value. So you have something and you want to exchange it with something that has higher value.
Right.
About 50 years later, this guy from Ireland, he came in and said, wait a minute, but you have to add risk to it, because you have something, you want to exchange it with something of higher value, but there is risk involved. It may not happen. So if you truly think about that definition, now people have added money on top of this and other stuff, and hey, some people say, hey, whoever has got a gift of gab is an entrepreneur. Not true.
Yeah.
So if you really take that definition, if you have something, that could be your ideas, that could be a product, that could be your time, that could be anything you have, and you want to exchange that for something of higher value, I would suggest every student is an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Okay, they've got something, their parents' money, or credit cards, or loans. They go to school, they spend time at night, and they study, and they expect to get a degree, thinking that that's of higher value.
Yeah.
But guess what? They may not get a job that they think they may get. They may
Yeah.
not be successful. That doesn't guarantee anything. So entrepreneurship is about having something, could be an idea, could be your time, could be anything, and exchanging that with something at some higher value, and expecting some risk in between. So an entrepreneur should understand the exchange rate. What is of higher value? You may define of higher value very differently than me. So definition of higher value becomes in question. I would say maybe Martin Luther King was also an entrepreneur. Well, he had something, he exchanged it with something that he decided is of higher value.
Yeah.
Right? Now, let's think about it in the context of now money and companies and businesses. So we have something which may be an idea, or we've built a product. We feel that if we offer this to people, bring it to market, offer it to others, it would give us more money, more value to us.
Mm-hmm.
You have some entrepreneurs that have this founderitis issue. Founderitis means the founder thinks that it's all about them and so forth. So they stick to that, and they think that the value is their recognition.
Yeah.
You have others who are just purely after money. You have some in between that are more of a social entrepreneurs, right? So depending on what you value and what you exchange, that defines the purpose of this entity, etc. But then there is the risk. The fact is, there is risk.
Sure.
And entrepreneurs are really the ones who understand what this is, understand what their expectation is, and understand how to manage the risk between A and B. How do you manage the risk? A, you have to understand it
Yeah.
and be aware of it, right? It's mindset, mindness, right? Awareness that there is risk.
Yeah.
The second is you have to understand that the value is not to you if you want to sell a product. The value has to be to somebody else.
For the
Here's the
buyer.
thing. What you want to get is get something and exchange it. So somebody else has to give you what you want, which may be money, in return and get what they want. And guess what? They have the decision. This is one big mistake most early stage companies and some big companies make. Some very, very big companies make. They think that they have a great sales floor and they sell. Revenues and profits are outcomes, Phil. You have no control, zero, in generating revenue. Your customer has the final decision. They decide if what you give them at the exchange rates that you're expecting them to pay you
Mm-hmm.
is a meaningful exchange. And if they think that, if you're selling the cure to cancer, they may sell their livelihood, they sell their house, they sell everything they've got for that one pill. If they don't have cancer, they don't care about it. There's no exchange, there's no relevance. Right. So realizing that the same thing happens with your employees. You think you're giving them a job, but they're really accepting a job, and they decide what they bring to the table. Do they bring their full-hearted innovation and capability, or do they say, Phil, I have a 2-year-old kid, or I have a sick mother. I just care about your benefits, and yeah, I'll show up at 9, I leave at 5, but after 5. I'm not giving you because you only give me X and I'm really worth X plus Y. So they decide what they bring to the table when you think that you've offered them a job. Now, this same exchange, value exchange, is valid for partners, for investors, and for even the society. Right. So these are the 5 pillars, and it's these exchanges that really define how a business works. So you are an entrepreneur, you have an idea, you want money. There are a few things that are important. A, as an early stage investor, I'm looking to see, have you figured out what the buyer wants, not what you have. I don't care about what you have. I don't care about what you have. And this
Right.
may sound, your idea, everybody has ideas. I care about, do they want it? Do they value what it is? And some people come in and say, how? I have an MVP, a minimum viable product. So why is it viable? Well, because that was as much as money as we had. I don't care how much money you had. It's not viable until they are willing to pay you in exchange of what you provided. So you may have done 200 proof of concept studies, but as long as they haven't paid you, they haven't decided that this is of value.
Yeah.
Right? So number one is, when I'm making an investment, I'm looking to see, is there validation that the buyer thinks that they have value, this idea has value. I don't care if I think I'm an idiot too. I may love something, but that doesn't qualify it as a business. It's a good hobby. And it's not the entrepreneur that matters, that feels that this is great. No, the entrepreneurs, many of them may disagree with me. They say, oh, I mean, some say, oh, Steve Jobs says it's not the job of the customers to know what they want. Yeah, but at the end, they pay for it. So it's not their job, but if you're not figuring out what they want, they ain't going to buy it.
Well, I think that thought that Steve Jobs, or that expression that he had, was taken out of context, because what he was really saying was they don't know they want it until we show it to them, and they're going to see value. And all he did was combine 6 or 7 separate, disparate systems and put them together. So people say that, oh well, the customer will the customer doesn't know they want this until we show it to them. And I agree with you. You have to find a customer to buy your product
Yep.
before you can, with your
They
minimum
have
viable product.
they have the decision. This is what I want to focus on. So they have the decision to buy or not to buy, to give
Right.
you that exchange. And it may not be just functionality. It may be prestige. Why do people buy a Ferrari as opposed to a Honda? It's not a matter of a transportation functionality. Those cars transport you from A to B. A Ferrari is actually maybe a horrible transportation means because it breaks all the time. But people buy it because of reasons that are not necessarily based on functionality. They're based on other features and functions and things, based on price, based on prestige, based on comfort, based on experience, based on a lot of other stuff, based on the collection of things, a bundle of satisfaction. Now, so one is I'm looking to see if the entrepreneur who has an idea, who thinks that is exchange it with something value, that exchange is a reasonable exchange. It's viable, it exists, and it's big. Two is I want to see if he has managed the risk. And can he think through the risks? Because again, at some point when I had the venture capital entity and I was doing um, the angel investing for with the organization, I was probably looking at 2,000-3,000 deals a year.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it may be that I am unaware. It may be that I'm unaware. But I have not seen in all those years, in all those business plans that I have seen, a single one that completed and drove to excess and success based on the original plan that they presented.
Oh,
I've not seen one.
yeah.
Okay. So the issue of risk is we don't know all the risks. But is this person, is this leader, is this entrepreneur has the ability, the capacity of changing direction, taking advice, being ready to stay until it gets delivered, staying the course, all of that stuff put together, coachability, flexibility, you name it. So part of that is, do we have the risks identified and are they reasonable? Or are we just showing this graph that goes like this and say, oh, look, we're going to make $1 trillion by year 5 and and we're going to capture, if no, this is the one that I love, if we capture 1% of the market, we'll be at $100 million a year. If I'm making this investment, I don't want you to capture 1% of the market. I want you to capture all of the market. Who would go into a business and say, hey, let's go capture one? If we capture, no. If we capture means that you have no idea how you're going to capture it. We're going to throw the dice and hopefully we'll get it. Right? So, so one was the element of knowing that the decision is with the buyer and what have we done to figure out that formula. Two is, have we figured this risk out and do we have the right entrepreneur and the right characteristics? Now that gets to the last one, which is money. Money comes from an investor. An investor has $1 trillion options in front of him. We get, and I am a nobody. If you go to a Anderson, or you go to a Benchmark, or you go to a Kleiner, or you go to a Sequoia, they get thousands of deals every week. I mean, I may get 10, they get hundreds. So they have tremendous amount of opportunities. So you may think that your deal is great, but all of those deals look great. And guess what?
Yeah.
They have lots of money. They don't need to make this investment in you. They can put it in, in the market. They could put it with the hedge fund guys and get 20% return, 15% return, and they're perfectly fine. Because what some entrepreneurs, and we could talk about this, some entrepreneurs don't understand that the VC business is a business.
Yeah, it's a business.
It has It's a fund. It has guidelines. They make an investment. Those people, it's not their money. It's somebody else's money. They have some obligations. They have fiduciary responsibilities. But guess what? Those administrators of those funds, quote unquote VCs, they are getting a management fee out of those things, and that's how they make their living. And if they have another fund and another fund, it's like giving themselves a raise, and they have to get something that's exitable. If they don't exist, if they don't exit within a certain time frame, usually 7 to 10 years, then they're not going to be able to close the next round, and they're hitting themselves in the pocketbook, and there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So that's something that the entrepreneurs have to understand when they're raising money, is that math. It's about the math. It's math. Whether it's, if you go to somebody who's an investor, does real estate stuff, has too much money, wants to give you something for this idea that you have, that may be a real estate investor, but that's not a professional venture investor. A professional venture investor thinks through things differently, because that's how they make their living.
Right.
Okay, their risk profile, the way they look at deals, the way they want the things to be, all of that is very different, which impacts the valuation of how you do things. You come to me, I value things differently than if you go to your second cousin who's got lots of money because he's a doctor.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about the valuation. Your dad doesn't care. But if you want to go and tell them, hey, look, my business is $100 million, they say, okay, if you say so. So those are some of the mistakes that are actually made. People go in, they think that they've got a company. They go tell their girlfriend or boyfriend that I have this great company. I just raised money at $20 million valuation. Guess what? Reality is going to check in when you go to a professional investor.
Yeah.
And if you are going the venture route, you are going to face one.
Yeah.
Sooner or later.
Well,
you hope. Yeah. So
even the angel investors are more sophisticated today.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. If the angel investors are in the business of investing in companies, they're sophisticated to some extent, some more, some less, right?
Yeah.
But what do the exchange look like for an investor? Right? We said you want a decision to be made by the buyer, that exchange should work. You want an employee to come work for you, that exchange. You want somebody's money, that exchange should work. Is the risk mitigated? Early stage, they understand this is a pretty risky business.
Yeah.
Okay. They understand that. But have we thought through the risks as an entrepreneur? And are you the one who's going to, so coachability, risk mitigation, and so forth. 2, are the dogs eating the dog food, or will they? Meaning, is the exchange, the decision of the buyer been considered? Do we know what it is that they would pay for? Right. So that's the second element. The third element is, I hear a little bit of my own echo. I mean, I love my own voice, but not that much. I don't know why I'm hearing an echo, but let's see if we can survive it. The third is obviously the return expectations. Is this business big enough that if I'm taking the risk, giving you $1 million, I would be able to make 100? So let's think through this. If I give you $1 million and I take, let's say, 10% of your business, right? 10%. If you even don't go, if you don't raise any more money, that means you don't get diluted at all. And I'm expecting 100 million. I expect 100x. Why? Because I've got other businesses, and I have to make the mistakes that I've made out of this one.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting $100 million for my 10%. If we don't raise one more dollar, if my 10% is $100 million, how much should the business worth? $1 billion. So is this $1 billion business?
Yeah.
Becomes the question.
Yeah. Yeah. But the chances of generating $1 billion business without raising any more money
is pretty nominal. So you see, so the return, the expected, then there is chemistry. Do I like you as an entrepreneur? Can I pick up a phone from you on a Sunday night because you have an issue? Because you will call me. Do we communicate? Am I gonna have fun doing this with you?
Yeah.
Lastly, who the hell am I? So people say, "Oh, my business is worth $5 million." Why? Because Joe had a business that was $5 million. Now, here's my question: if I am the investor and you're looking for $1 million, if I am the investors and you give me $5 million as a valuation, is it the same valuation if Elon Musk is the investor? I hope you don't say yes. The value that that guy can bring to the table with one tweet, he can make or break you. The fact that he's going to have other people following him to make an investment at whatever the hell valuation you want them to. So
Yeah.
there is the people are different. The point is, this is why you're not them in terms of the book and the philosophy. You are not them. Don't compare yourself to Joe's deal and Jack's deals and this thing and that thing. Every one of us are different. The deals are different. The audience is different. Who buys is different. Your product is different. The environment is different. Who works for you is different. You are different. You're short, you're tall, you're fat, you're skinny, you're educated, not
Yeah.
educated, you're from the streets, you're not. None of us are the same. And the businesses that we run are not the same. The products that we are not the same. The environment that we are selling them is not the same. The audience who buys it, yes, it's between 24 to 48 years old, but these are not the same 24 to 48 years old that Jobs or X or Y had to deal with. So all of this is different. How would you succeed? With your personal entrepreneurial philosophy, which has to do with your authentic approach. What do I want to see? I want to see you being authentic in your approach of running a business as an investor.
Yeah.
That was a long winded answer to a very short question.
Well, it's an important one. I think that, like I said, I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs and try and guide them and mentor them and give them any kind of advice. And they seem to all think that they're going to do a great deck and go out there and raise a ton of money. And like you said, maybe that happens once out of every 10,000, 15, 20,000, but it doesn't happen on a regular basis. And you've got to go out there and, I tell everybody, don't focus on that right now. Focus on trying to get your product out, trying to find customers who are going to buy it. And then you'll see if your model works, and you'll see it'll tell you something. We work with a company now who has
Yeah,
been,
but they always tell you, hey, I don't have money to build it. I don't have the market. I don't have the. Those are the real challenges of you want true entrepreneurship is not if somebody gives you money and somebody gives you a team and say, hey, they go execute. You sit in the back room, smoke a cigar, and then you're an entrepreneur. No, it's the sausage making that differentiates a good entrepreneur versus somebody who's just a dreamer. The sausage making is the part that makes the business good or bad. The original idea may be fair, but the outcome may be great. The original idea may be poor, but the outcome may be great. The original idea may be great, and the outcome would be poor.
yeah. But as you said, what makes an entrepreneur is figuring out how to get it to the market with in light of all those obstacles. And you have to get it to the market, and you have to prove your concept. And like I was about to say, we're working with a company that has been working on a product for about 7 years. And now they're at the point where, okay, they have to test the market, because nobody is going to invest in it until you test the market. And so the best way to do it was through a Kickstarter. And they were able to test a price point, test the marketing messages. And yeah, people purchased the product and they sold out very quickly. And okay, that's great. Now you've got to go step two and start bringing it to the mass market and see if they're going to buy it
So
before.
I'll go one level. It's not see if you have a restaurant, it's not the first time you sell that marinara sauce. It's the second time.
Yeah.
The first time, you could make your way through hoopla and marketing gimmickry or by like, can this guy come back?
Yeah.
Then you got a business.
Yeah.
The second sell is really what defines your future, not the first.
Yeah. Well, this particular product has a, you have to come back and continue to buy other components to it, because if you don't, then your first purchase was a waste. And they are seeing that, but at the same time, they've got to sell it in a little bit more breadth than I think the Kickstarter was a learning step. But
Yeah.
know.
No, um, I met an entrepreneur who was a PhD student at USC, and they started something, get kickstarted. They had about $160,000 worth of revenue, and then but then the minute that Kickstarter got done, they had all the challenges started. How do
Yeah.
you mass produce it, and then how do you sell it, because they couldn't sell it anymore.
Yeah.
The good news is that that was an extremely competent CEO. The business started, that was 2017. 7 years later, the last raise was at $500 million.
Yeah.
That's the valuation. Actually, 498 million or something like that. The run rate of tens of millions of dollars of getting close to a 50-60 million revenue rate.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of stuff, movements along the way that had to happen. So Kickstarter is a good idea, but some folks say, well, I don't have the initial money, and how do I get inventory? And it's good for physical products. And there's there are different challenges, obviously, in any platform, any way you do it. But the key is that I can believe in you that you can sell it and give you the money to do it, but all those other ingredients have to be there.
Sure.
Sure. And this happens in Silicon Valley. This happens in early stage companies. It's not always that you have the product or you have everything sold or whatever, but as long as you have sufficient intelligence that points to mitigated risk, the decision of the buyer, the flexibility that's there, and a market that's big enough that you have the investors to jump in and get something, balancing the risk and the return. If you have all those elements, then yeah, you could have a little more of one and a little less of one, and it'll work.
Yeah.
But as you said, it's not take 7 pages of PowerPoint. And I'm in another fund, and we have an investment in a company. They a year ago now, a year and a couple of months ago, 14 months ago, excuse me, they raised somewhere around, I believe, somewhere around $20 million or $15 million at a valuation of 40 some million. 9 months later, they came back to the market about a year later at a $75 million valuation with a $13 million recurring revenue. Pretty impressive. They couldn't raise a dime. They actually had to go to a $35 million valuation, which was less than what they did a year and a change ago.
Wow.
That's the reality of the venture market today. Is that going to be forever? No, things will change. So my advice to people is today, and by the way, for forever, if you don't need the money, you don't need somebody like me to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Stay away from us. If you absolutely have to have it, take as little as you possibly can. You don't go to a VC because you say, well, I need a job. If you need a job, go get a job. But if you're giving up your equity in terms of your livelihood and all that, you have to really measure that of how it works. They're not there to give you $5 million because you don't have a job, and they should take the risk. And by the way, you have to maintain control and all that. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we've got about 4 minutes left. Do you have any? We didn't
You
get
see
to
why
talk.
they call me philosopher? Because I can philosophize until cows come home.
Yeah. Well, we didn't really delve into the philosopher part as much, or your book, but we have about 4 minutes. So, any closing remarks that you want to get across to anybody? How people can get in touch with you, if they wanted to get in touch with you, how people can follow you, that type of thing.
Sure. So actually, getting in touch with me is pretty simple. My name is Sid Mohasseb. My email is sid@mohasseb.com. So what's on the screen gets to me. I can be reached at the email. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on social media. Um, and yes, I have lots of TEDx. I mean, I have a couple of TEDx things. I have lots of videos. And if folks watch those, they probably get a little bit of more of a flavor of my thinking. I uh, One of the areas that I really focus on is this notion of change, and then the idea that you don't manage change. It's not a bad thing for you to manage. It's not like a bad kid that you have to
Yeah,
manage the kid so it behaves. If there was no change, there wouldn't be any opportunities. There wouldn't be any options in life.
yeah,
So change is really our best friend.
yeah,
It's the only friend that gives us options. Sameness never gives us any options.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
stuck. Um, so I'm of the belief that we have to not only face change but embrace it. Not only embrace it but make it.
yeah,
And that I don't believe anybody can motivate anybody. I believe that people can only self-motivate if they see a reason to
yeah,
to act. I can only provoke people. So I can poke you like a bear and say, "Hey, wake up! There's something out there." So I think if people like that approach, they can see that through the body of my work and articles and others. Um, I really don't make much money out of the books, as any author knows.
yeah,
But I would love for you to tell me if you get them and tell me your opinion, because that's how I learn, and that's how we exchange ideas and so forth. So if you get them, they're on Amazon platforms, and audio and all that sort of electronic and physical and sorts of all sorts of different means. um, and that's about it. That's who I am, and love to hear from people. Love the idea of the exchange, and I do help entrepreneurs. I do have folks that I mentor. I help if I like them, and if I see that there is a there, and if all of that makes sense. I'm too old to be in 64 different places, so I like to spend time with people I like.
yeah. There you go.
And I recommend that's what every entrepreneur should do. Don't work with an investor just because they're an investor,
Yeah, yeah,
because they're gonna be the ones who are gonna have your back when things don't go right, and things
yeah.
are guaranteed not to go right at some point in
Oh,
your life.
absolutely. I think we've heard that from every single startup entrepreneur that we've had on the show, that there's
Yeah.
always a pivot, there's always a change. You're 100% right. Well, we're almost out of time. Got about 15 seconds left, but I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. And I started to read "You Are Not You Are Not Them." I haven't finished it, but I'll as soon as I'm done with it, I'll let you know, and let you know my thoughts on that.
Love to hear your thought. That book is a little poetic, a little bit philosophical.
Yeah.
So don't expect the how-to.
No.
Expect that provoking thing that I tell you. I
Yeah.
am fundamentally of the belief that people are fully capable of creating their authentic path, and much better than I can tell them do A, do B, and do C.
Yeah. There you go. Well, Sid, thanks again for being on. I appreciate it. It was a very philosophical discussion and very interesting. So,
Pleasure to be
thank
with
you.
you, Phil. A pleasure to be with your audience.
All right, thank you.
Take
Thanks
care.
for being on.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Interesting show. Interesting guy. I knew he was going to be interesting. Obviously in the prep work, but I read a lot of his articles and I saw a couple of videos of his speaking. And when you think about it, he's a guy who's run businesses, owned businesses, startup businesses. Then he got into investing, so he has a very specific view on investing. But he's 100% right. One of the things that entrepreneurs don't understand is investing. Investors, whether it's through angel investors or venture capital or private equity, that's their job, and they have to get a return, and they have certain guidelines because they are dealing with other people's money. That's how they raise money, through their funds. So I think entrepreneurs sometimes have this idea that there's just a money pool and nobody cares. They're just going to, if they like the idea, they'll give you money. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But they have to get a return for their investors. So I think his philosophy and his approach and his what he was talking about and how he was discussing it is very useful for everybody out there. So again, I thought it was interesting. I love that kind of. I love listening to philosophizing about entrepreneurship. He's certainly seen his share of businesses, startups, and entrepreneurs. So good information there. Check out some of his books. Check out some of his reading. I think you'll find it interesting. Meanwhile, for those of you, you can go to my site, philmasiello.com, and you can download there's a business planning guide. It's a free download. If for those of you who are thinking about starting a business, or you know, we read a lot about, we see these things on social media about doing side gigs, and all this about I'd have a side gig of making $40,000 a month. Let me tell you something. I don't know anybody who has what's known as a side gig. You can't be successful as a side gig. You're either in or you're not, because you're not going to be generating 40 or 50 or $100,000 a month just by going home and packaging up some stuff and selling it on Amazon. It doesn't work that way. Believe me, I've been an Amazon seller since 2006. So anyway, but if you're planning on a business, go and download it. And there's another one on our Crunch Growth site for our agency, for what you can expect in marketing, as far as a good marketing plans. So with that, we've got a couple of great shows coming up. A lot of focus on AI, because a lot of people are focused on AI and AI doing different things. So we've got some founders for AI products coming on over the next couple of weeks, and just some interesting, again, always interesting entrepreneurs like Sid. So with that, it's time to go. I appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you'll tune in next week. All my shows are available on E360 TV, so you can go back and watch them for all the way through season 1, episode 1. So hopefully you get something out of it. And I'm always available, phil@philmasiello.com. You can go to my websites and find me on any given place, and obviously here. So with that, thank you again, and we'll see you next week.